Hello, my name is Mathias and welcome to the FPL Scope YouTube channel. Today we're going to take a look at some different drafts. I know a lot of you guys have seen a lot of drafts on Twitter or on YouTube, and they more or less look the same, pretty similar to the one that you look at currently, which is my current draft, my own personal drafts, because the template is settling now in FPL and a lot of people are going for the same players, so it's kind of boring to just look at the same teams all over again. So we're going to take a look at a couple of different drafts with a couple of different players that you might not have considered yet. So I think it's going to be a fun video. I hope you stick through to the end. And yeah, let's just go straight at it. The first team is, like I said, my current squad. I went through this team in detail in my previous video here on this YouTube channel, so you can check out that video if you want to after this video. Yeah, where I basically go through all these players, which are pretty much quite template, except for Salah, who's like not that template, but anyways, you can listen to my thoughts about Salah and all those other guys. Odogi as well is also someone who's kind of out there, but we're gonna touch on these players as well as we go along with the other squads. But what I figured what to do and what I think would be fun to see on Twitter as well is to see what people would pick if they couldn't pick a single player from their team, from their current team, except for Haaland, because Haaland obviously has to be in every squad. But that's exactly what I did. I went through with my original team. I went to the transfer page, X'd out or crossed out all the players, and only Haaland could remain. And this is the team that I came up with, like the best possible team I could get without the players that I have in my current squad. So this is sort of like my inverted squad with players that I don't have in my squad currently, but that I'm really considering as well. So in goal, we have Onana, who is, well, pretty much the template goalkeeper. I don't really have to talk that much about him. He's really good distributing with his feet. In goal, he's going to get a lot of bonus points that way. Plays for the team that had the most clean sheets last season, so he makes a lot of sense. Bentley, he's sort of like the other potential 4.0 goalkeeper apart from Areola, who might play. He might be the starting goalkeeper for Wolverhampton, but it seems like they might bring in a new goalkeeper if they sell Jose Sa in the first place, so we'll get to see there. Trent Alexander-Arnold and Chilwell, also quite template players. Don't really have to talk much about them. I know a lot of other content creators have spoken about them at length, so I don't really have to. Zinchenko is sort of like a cheat code compared to Gabriel, but seeing as I can't pick Gabriel, I picked Zinchenko, who plays for the same defense and is sort of similar. Like, he has a different playstyle obviously than Gabriel. They're very different players, but Zinchenko at some point last season was like the main Arsenal player to have, or Arsenal defender to have at least. And he could be that from the start of this season as well. I know he started strongly last season. He had like a 12-pointer, I think, in Game Week 1, had an assist. So maybe it is the same thing again. I think he's a pretty good starter there for Arsenal. The only thing with him compared to Gabriel is that I feel like he's slightly more under threat compared to Gabriel when it comes to starting position. Gabriel is a left-footed center-back, so he only has really Kivior to compete with in the central defense. But with this signing of Yuri and Timber, Zinchenko's place is a little bit under threat because Timber can play on the left, as we saw in preseason. They could play with Timber on the left and Ben White on the right. And yeah, Zinchenko's not a sure starter, so that's why I prefer Gabriel, but he's a decent starter in his own right. Then we have Wan-Bissaka doubling up on Man United defense, which is completely contradictory to what I do with my personal team because I have no Man United players in defense currently. So, but yeah, I think that could be a good strategy anyway. I think Wan-Bissaka is going to play quite a lot of games. He's going to be benched for a couple of them, but I think he's also the type of player who doesn't get subbed on that much. Sometimes he gets subbed on for like 20 minutes, but usually he either plays 90 minutes or 0 minutes, which is really good for FPL. Finally, we have Kabore, who's one of the 4.0 defenders. I'm going to talk about him in a different squad, so I don't have to talk about him now, really. Heung-min Son, another good option. I'm going to talk about him in the next squad as well. Bruno Fernandes, he is sort of like the 1A, 1B option compared to Rashford when it comes to Man United. Some people say that Fernandes is the better pick. It sort of feels like Fernandes is being more and more template now. He's more and more the template pick ahead of Rashford, but a lot of people are bringing in both of them together, and I can certainly see the appeal for that because Fernandes is fantastic, and for 8.5, it's a really good midfielder. We have the 6.5 midfielders, which we'll get to in a different squad pretty soon. We also have Anderson, who is sort of like, apart from Ahamada, who I have in my current team, he's sort of like the other 4.5 midfielder I'm considering. I'm not considering Nakamba at all. I went through that in the previous video that I did on my own personal team, but Anderson is someone that has caught my eye in preseason, obviously, because he's had a lot of goals and assists. He's been like one of the fittest players in the league. I think the quotes from him, or from Eddie Howe at least, is that Anderson showed up as the most like fit to play player out of all the Newcastle players. So I think he has an okay chance to play. He can play both on the wings and in midfield. So he's quite versatile as well, and he's shown that he has an eye for goal. He has an eye for an assist. So he's a decent shout, but I still think he's on the outside looking in for a Newcastle team that is really, really strong, especially on the left wing positions and the central midfielder positions where he is likely to play if he gets to play. Then we have Haaland, don't really have to talk much about him. And Kunku as well, I'm going to get to him in a different team. But finally we have Darwin, who is really interesting. He's gaining a lot of steam lately in FPL because he keeps scoring in preseason. He's been very clinical in preseason, which is completely different to what he did last season in FPL. But you got to remember back to his Benfica days as well. Like his first season was not the best for Benfica, but then his second season he really blossomed and scored a lot of goals. He was really clinical for Benfica as well in that second season. So a lot of people are looking to Darwin as a potential starter for Liverpool, for the Liverpool attack. And if he starts for Liverpool regularly for 7.5, he's going to make a mockery out of that price. So Darwin is definitely in my thoughts for sure. So I think this inverted squad, picking no single player that I have in my current team personally, apart from Haaland, is in this team. So I still think it looks like a fantastic team, perhaps even better than my current team, which is kind of crazy considering it's 30 different players, or 29 different players at least, with Haaland and the rest of them. But anyways, that is the inverted squad, which is kind of fun. I hope to see all you guys post your inverted squads as well, whether it's through Twitter or X as they call it, or if it's in the comment section if you want to post your current team and your next 15 players as well, because it would be really fun to see some different players than the usual suspects that we've seen every single time, pretty much in midfield and attack. But if you're more interested in some other differential players that are potentially good players if they get playing time, then this is the squad for you. This is the if only they were nailed squad. So these players have really good value if they are starters. So like I said with Darwin, he's one of those players who, if he is the starter for Liverpool, he's fantastic value. But there's also like a minutes risk with him. And with this team, you have a lot of players with minutes risks. And that's why they are in this team. Sort of to illustrate, like these players are really good, especially if they become first choice with their team. Some players might actually be first choice if the player ahead of them gets injured. We have, for example, Isak, who I'm going to get to eventually, but Isak and Wilson sort of block each other off when it comes to Newcastle. Both are fantastic strikers. If they were only there by themselves and the other player was not with Newcastle, they would be fantastic value for 7.5 and 8.0 respectively. But seeing as they are both fit to play, you can't really trust Wilson because he's not going to start every game, and you can't really trust Isak because he's going to start on the left for quite a lot of the games, like we saw at the end of last season. So yeah, I don't really think you should go for either Newcastle player at this point, but later on in the season, if either one of them gets injured, go ahead, go straight for the other one that's not injured. That's been a pretty common tactic back in the day in FPL as well. I remember back when Man City used to have Aguero and Gabriel Jesus. Whenever Jesus got injured and Aguero was the lone striker, you bought him in. If Aguero was injured, then Jesus was a really good signing as well. So that's also something you got to keep in mind. So a lot of these players have that sort of thing. It's the same with Diogo Jota and Luis Diaz as well. They compete for the left wing spot for Liverpool, and if either one of them gets injured, most likely Luis Diaz because he's been injured the last few seasons, then the other pick would be fantastic. So if Diaz gets injured again, then Diogo Jota is a fantastic pick for 8.0. He's played left wing mostly at the start of the season as well, so I feel like he's going to start at left wing at the beginning of the season. But Luis Diaz is so talented, he might get back his starting place as well for Liverpool, so that'll be fun to see. But as for the goalkeepers, we have Jason Steele for Brighton. His goalkeeping spot is pretty secure. It feels like he's the starter now, but they also have Bart Verbruggen, who is kind of looming in the background there. So if Steele has a couple of bad games, then De Zerbi can easily swap out his goalkeeper, like he did last season when he swapped out Robert Sanchez for Steele. So that might happen again. So that's why we're kind of unsure about Steele. Because if he played every single game, he's pretty good value, especially with the fixtures that Brighton have at the start of the season. We also have Diogo Dalot. I mentioned Wan-Bissaka in the previous squad, and he's the competition for Dalot. But if Wan-Bissaka gets injured, like I said, it's the same with Wan-Bissaka and Dalot. If Wan-Bissaka gets injured, Diogo Dalot is fantastic value for 5.0. He's going to be potentially even more attacking than Luke Shaw, and he's going to be 0.5 less than Luke Shaw. So if he's nailed, which is the theme of this team, then if Dalot is nailed, he is a better pick than both Onana and Shaw in my books, at least. So yeah, he's someone to pay attention to as well. Pedro Porro is more like the presumed starter for Spurs, but I still have some doubts that Postecoglou is going to play both Udogie and Pedro Porro at the same time. And I feel like Udogie, considering the options they have at left back, is more secure as a starter than Pedro Porro. Even though Pedro Porro has better underlying numbers and he's already proven in Fantasy Premier League, I feel like Udogie is the more nailed player, and I also feel like he fits Postecoglou's system more than Pedro Porro does. But if Pedro Porro gets a run with the team and he plays regularly every single game, he could be a fantastic value for 5.0. He had 3 goals and 3 assists in 50 matches last season, which is crazy for a defender. So Pedro Porro has all the makings of being like a fantasy favorite, like sort of like Alonso back in the day. Like when he plays, he's fantastic, but he's not going to be a sure starter every week. So I think Pedro Porro is a really fun pick. Then we have Nathan Ake, who is the same, plays for City defense. It's always difficult to buy Ake because Pep can praise him. He can say Ake is exactly what we need in this team, and then he goes 5 straight games without Ake playing from start at all. So yeah, especially with Guardiola, if they manage to sign him properly, he has the here we go from Fabrizio Romano Guardiola, but it seems like the transfer has hit a bit of a snag. But it feels like Guardiola is going to end up with City, and if he comes to City, Ake's position in the team is kind of under threat. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure about Ake's playing time, but that's, like I said, that's the mission with this team, to pick the players that we are not certain about with the playing time, but we are certain about their value if they get the playing time. Then we have Benoit Badiashile for Chelsea. He's going to fight with Levi Colwill for the left centre-back spot at Chelsea. Badiashile is also injured for the first couple of matches. He's not registered as injured in FPL for some reason, but I think he's out until game week 3 at least, potentially even a bit longer. But I think Badiashile is going to be the starter over Colwill personally most weeks. So I think he is really someone to watch. He's only 4.5. He showed some really good goal threat last season. He's really tall, really commanding in the box. So I think Badiashile, if he plays consistently for Chelsea, and especially if Chelsea are doing better now under Pochettino, which it seems like they are going to, Badiashile might be a steal for 4.5. Then we have Jared Branthwaite for 4.0. He's also someone I'm going to talk about later on because I have a team full of 4.0 defenders. That's the next team in line, so we're going to talk about them shortly. Or already mentioned the Liverpool guys, Jota and Diaz. Get one of them if the other one gets injured. Then we have Phil Foden, who is like the main, if he gets minutes, he's a fantastic player. And a lot of people seem to think that he's getting minutes at the start of the season as well. And I think I might fall in that category as well. I think it's just him and the other Man City player that we have here, Julian Alvarez. They are both fighting for sort of the same position-ish. When Kevin De Bruyne is back in the team, they have a spot for Bernardo, they have a spot for Grealish, they have a spot for De Bruyne, they have Rodri, they have Haaland. So that's 5 players. And then it's either Foden or Alvarez. I can't remember. I don't think I missed anyone, but potentially you have like Kovacic and stuff as well, Cole Palmer. They have a couple of different players. They might sign some players as well, but it's either Foden or Alvarez for the final starting spot, because Foden and Alvarez played together now against Atletico Madrid, but that was without KDB, who's going to be back. Whether it's game week 1 or it's game week 2, he's going to be back pretty soon. So it's just a matter of figuring out who plays out of Foden and Alvarez. Most likely they're going to rotate a little bit, so that's going to be a bit annoying, but both those guys are fantastic if they get to play, especially Alvarez. If Haaland gets injured at some point, Alvarez is going straight into every single team in the whole game. So yeah, he's a really fun player. Speaking of strikers who might be gone from the game and open up something for a different player on the same team, we have Richarlison, who is just waiting and biding his time for Harry Kane to leave to go to Bayern Munich, and then Richarlison can start his redemption season this season. He's a 7.0 midfielder in the game. I don't know why they listed him as a midfielder. I guess it's because he played as a winger last season, but he is the starting striker for Spurs if Kane leaves. Even if Kane hasn't left yet, maybe he's getting rested to not risk injury or something before they can sell him to Bayern Munich, because it feels like Kane, he wants to go to Bayern Munich. Spurs are kind of willing to sell him because they need to rebuild. They can't really build around Kane anymore. So it feels like that transfer is going to happen. And if that transfer happens and Richarlison is the starting striker, he's probably going to be a template pick. So keep an eye for Richarlison if he gets playing time. He's fantastic. Like I said, with all these players, that counts. That's the same for all these players, really. And also especially for Brighton, which is sort of like the if only they were nailed team. Like if there's a single team that embodies that spirit, it is Brighton, because they have so many attacking players. It's really hard to see who's going to play. Mitoma and March seem like the most secure players. Joao Pedro as well seems like he has more of a sure start than these other players. We have Ferguson, who I think is going to be the starting striker for Brighton, but at the same time they have Welbeck, they have Joao Pedro who can play up front as well. They have a lot of competition for those places, so I don't think Ferguson is nailed by any means, and that's why people are not picking him in FPL, because for 6.0 Ferguson, the things that he showed last season, the talent that he has, for 6.0 that's nothing really if he plays every single game, but he doesn't really. And that could even more be said for Julio Enciso, who seems like the perfect pick in FPL. If he plays every game, it's going to be fantastic. He played a lot of matches towards the end of last season and was fantastic. He got a lot of points in FPL for those that were brave enough to go for him. But this season, he not only has to fend off Adam Lallana, who kept him out of the squad at the start of the season last season, but he also has to fend off Joao Pedro, who is brought in as the attacking midfielder for Brighton. So Joao Pedro makes Enciso and Ferguson a lot less secure for playing time, and that's why they are in this team. But if they get a consistent run in the team, fantastic. I've said that like 8 times now, so I think you get the point with this team. But anyways, that is the if only they were a nail team. A lot of good players that just need the playing time, really. Next up, we have the every premium player or every premium attacker everywhere at once, or whatever that show is called. I don't know, I haven't watched it. But anyways, this is the team for you if you want to have the best player to have in every single team. So you have Haaland from Man City, you have Saka from Arsenal, you have Rashford from Man United, you have Son from Spurs, you have Salah from Liverpool, and you have Nkunku from Chelsea. That's pretty much the whole deal with this team. And you also, to add a little bit of spice, you have the best Brighton players as well, or some of the best at least. Estepinian for 5.0. You don't have Mitoma because we couldn't afford that, but we have Joao Pedro for 5.5. Joao Pedro is someone I really would like to talk about as well, because he is gaining steam as one of the players that might be in my team personally, and a lot of other FPL content creators or FPL managers across Twitter and stuff. I see people considering Joao Pedro, and that's because he's only 5.5. He's listed as a striker, even though he's going to play mostly attacking mid, I feel like. But he's so good, and he didn't have the best numbers for Watford last season, but he fits perfectly under with what De Zerbi wants to do at Brighton. That's why they signed him. He has been given the number 9 shirt. He's going to play some minutes as striker. He's so versatile. He can play on the left. He can play on the right. He can play pretty much everywhere, and that's why he is a really interesting pick, because I feel like he's the one type of player who could play 90 minutes. He plays some minutes at attacking mid, some minutes as strikers, and some minutes as a winger as well. So I think he's going to get a lot of playing time. I think he's going to be the 3rd most played player for Brighton, only behind Mitoma and March, really. Right, slightly ahead of Ferguson, probably. So yeah, he's a really fun player. All the big players I don't really have to talk about. We all know the value of them. I just talked about Son earlier as well. He's going to be even more of a talisman if Kane leaves. He's going to be on pens if Kane leaves. So he's a fantastic player. Salah, I made a huge case for him in my own team, in my own current squad. The video that I made yesterday that you can check out. So check out that if you want. Estepinian as well has always been in my teams. So don't really have to talk much about him. Already mentioned Steele. Then we have all the 4.0 defenders that are viable starters, potentially. Because with this team, with all the premium players from all the big teams, you have to cut costs across the board in defense. This is pretty much an all-out attack type of team, and we have 4.0 defenders. We have Kabore, who is the starting right wing back for Luton. Luton are not the best team, but Kabore seems to be the main starter there. He comes from Man City. He's on loan from Man City. He was on loan in Ligue 1 last season and played really well. So he might be a really good player if Luton are a good team. Maybe Luton are really good at home. Some people have claimed that Luton could be one of those teams that are really good at home, kind of like Nottingham Forest last season, where if they have a home game, you can play them, and if they have an away game, you can bench them. And Kabore would be a fantastic pick if he is like that, if he's really good at home. Same can sort of be said about George Baldock, who plays for Sheffield United. He plays in the same position, right wing back. Jayden Bogle, who is his prime opposition or prime rival for a starting spot with the team, is coming back from injury. So Baldock seems to be pretty nailed at right wing back for Sheffield United. He has FPL pedigree as well. He was really good back when Sheffield United went up to the Premier League the last time. He got 140 something points and ended up costing 5.5 the following season, which is kind of crazy. But we also have the Burnley defender Jordan Beyer. He's likely going to be paired up with a different 4.0 defender as well. Could be Al-Dakhil, it could be Ekdal, but Beyer, we know, is going to be the starter for Burnley in defense. Burnley fans are so happy about Bayer. They feel like he is one of the best players they've had, and they've had some really good defenders as well. They've had Tarkowski and me as well. So I think Burnley fans know what they're talking about when it comes to defenders, and Jordan Bayer seems to be a fantastic pick. He also scored in preseason. Bulldog also scored in preseason, to be fair. So yeah, Bayer might be a really good pick as well, but he has Man City in the first game, and then he has a blanking in week 2, so he's not really the best pick for game week 1 potentially. But with this team, you have to really take what you can, or take what you can get. What you can get is yeah, how you say it. But anyways, he's also kind of a fun player. Then we have Jared Branthwaite. Not 100% sure if he's going to be the starter for Everton, but it seems like to me that he's the prime candidate to start next to Tarkowski. Michael Keane is terrible. Holgate is going out on loan or something. He's also 4.0, by the way, but I think he's leaving Everton either permanently or on loan. Yuri Mina has already left permanently. And then they have like Godfrey, who might play centre back. He potentially is the strongest candidate to play centre back rather than Branthwaite, but we have to Branthwaite and see, I guess. Terrible pun, sorry. Anyways, that's this team. Anderson is yeah, once again, the 4.5 midfielder that I've chosen. Don't really have to say much more about him. So that is the every premium everywhere, all at once, whatever. I can't even say it because it's difficult to say. But moving on to the next team, which is kind of the opposite, because this is the non-Big Six team. So we don't have a single player from the Big Six teams. But yeah, this team, I'll admit, I sort of made it for aesthetic reasons. It's just so nice to look at all the Newcastle players on the left, all the Brentford players on the right, all the Aston Villa players down the middle, and then you have Steele, Estepinian, Mitoma on that side, and you have Johnston, Anderson, and Eze on that side. There are different teams you can target as well. There are not only 5 teams you can target outside the Big Six, but these are like the 5 strongest teams, I feel like, apart from the Big Six. Newcastle sort of also counts as a Big Six team now as well. So maybe if you're in one of these types of leagues, because some people have leagues where they play and they can't choose players from the Big Six, maybe that is the Big Seven now, and you can't choose Newcastle players as well. So if not, then I would probably target some other players, maybe West Ham, my own personal team, favorite team as well. They have some good players. I think Paqueta and potentially Antonio as well, if Antonio starts the season and just stays on as a striker. I think Paqueta and Antonio, and possibly Emerson as well, who's on set pieces and is most likely the starting left back until West Ham get a new left back. I think those 3 guys are the 3 guys I would go for with West Ham. But yeah, assuming you can play with Newcastle players if you're in these types of leagues, I think Trippier, Barnes, and Wilson are fantastic value. I have Wilson slightly ahead of Isak because they're both fit, and I think Wilson is going to play more as the central striker than Isak is going to be at the start of the season, so that's why I prefer Isak, or Wilson, I'm sorry. I do prefer Isak as a player. I think Isak is much better than Wilson in total, but Wilson has Premier League pedigree and is a fantastic striker in his own right, so yeah, I think he's a good pick. All the Aston Villa picks are also really interesting, I feel like, and really like not spoken about enough in FPL. Alex Moreno, for obvious reasons, he would be a really popular pick if he was fit to play. But seeing as he is injured for the start of the season, not that many people have him. But I think Moreno, once he's fit, he's going to be fantastic value. We've seen Villa. I think Mathias is also someone you can bank on at the start of the season. As we saw in the last friendly for Aston Villa, he played sort of like a super advanced attacking fullback. Meanwhile, Pau Torres was the sort of left back in the system with I think Mings and Carlos, I think, or Konsa. Yeah, Konsa was playing. But yeah, they were playing with 3 sort of defenders from left back, centre back. They had 3 central defenders, and then they had Mathias at right back who could really go far up the pitch. So Emery has talked a little bit about this, that he's going to play sort of like the inverted fullback role that everyone seems to play nowadays, and he can do that either with the right back, if that is Konsa playing as right back and Moreno as left back pushing forward, or if it's Pau Torres as left back and Cash as the right back pushing forward. So those are some fun options in defense for Aston Villa. You also have Moussa Diaby, the new signing. You can check out the video where we talk about him where I talk with Kevin, my co-host, about Diaby and what he could do in Fans Premier League. I think he's a fantastic player. He scored in 2 preseason games already. He's another fantastic 6.5 option, and as you can see, this team is full of 6.5 options. The whole midfield is 6.5 midfielders, the 5 best 6.5 midfielders, in my view at least. Potentially Solly March as well, but it couldn't fit in another Brighton player here. But Diaby is fantastic, and Eze is also someone who has been completely overlooked in fantasy. I feel like he also scored a fantastic goal in preseason. A lot of these players have done really well in preseason, so there are a lot of players to keep an eye on here. So Eze is one of those guys. He's fantastic. He was one of the best players in the whole game last season when Hodgson took over as manager, and why can't that continue? Like, they have 3 away games in the first 4 matches, sure, but Eze can score anywhere, and he is so good. He's going to have a proper breakout season and go to like a Big 6 club by the end of the season, I'm pretty sure. So he's definitely someone to look at. You also have Jan Vissa, who's kind of like the cheaper priced Mbuemo. Actually going to post a video pretty soon about Mbuemo versus Wissa, and Mitoma versus Pedro, and some other guys as well. But yeah, the Brentford guys are really interesting. I think Henry also decent pick. You could also go with Flecken, but Flecken has looked pretty poor in preseason. So I think Steele and Johnston are pretty solid goalkeepers for 4.5 as well. So yeah, that's just a fun little non-Big 6 squad. And that pretty much concludes all the squads that I have to present to you at this time. But you can also check out the FPL Scope guide, or the FPL guide that we have on thevideoscope.com/FPL guide. And there you can check out 4 more drafts, which is the template team, which is the one that you've seen all around. Every content creator basically has the same team nowadays. Then you have, again, I've done the same there. I've done like an alternate squad where I can't pick a single player from the template team in the alternate squad. So that's kind of different than compared to the alternate squad that I showed you here. Slightly similar, slightly different, but yeah, it's a pretty fun squad. Then you have the third squad, which is sort of early wildcard draft. If you want to wildcard in Game Week 5 already, you can target the players that are the best from Game Week 1 until Game Week 4. You don't have to think long term. And you also get the bench boost with that tactic as well. So that's another fun squad you can check out in the guide. The link will be in the description. And then the final team in the guide, the final squad suggestion in the guide at least, is the zombie squad, which is pretty much where you have to choose a team that is going to last you the whole season without a single transfer, without a single change. You're going to have the same starting 11 and the same 4 bench players the whole season and see how well you can do. Some players do non-Big 6 leagues like this. Some players do the zombie leagues where you can't change players. I don't do that personally, but I feel like I think it's really fun to try to make the best possible teams in those categories as well. So that's a lot of squads for you to check out, a lot of players for you to check out. I've written about all the players extensively as well in the guide. So yeah, please check that out if you want to see more players than just your usual Stones, Chilwell, Saka, Rashford, Bruno Fernandes, Mitoma, Mbuemo. You know the drill. Haaland, Jesus, the same. It's pretty much the same players all around. So if you're interested in more players than just those players, then yeah, I hope you've seen this whole video. Most likely you have if you're listening now. And hopefully you also checked out the guide that you can see in the description. So that's pretty much it for me. Again, I've lasted about half an hour in this video. That's usually around the time frame that I have where I just ramble. I just have a couple screens ready and I just talk, blabber, talk, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm finished. And I've reached that point. I'm finished with this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, and see you next time. Bye.